So, Joe, you mentioned polling and the recognition in the White House that Elon Musk's numbers going down, perhaps even Trump's himself. Well, we've got a brand new NBC News national poll finds that 28% of registered voters believe the Supreme Court and the judicial branch has too much power, while 49% said it has about the right amount. 8% said it had too little. But when it comes to executive power, 43% believe that the president and the executive branch have too much power, while 39% said the branch's power is about right, and 6% said it has too little. So, Jasmine, with that, let's talk about those numbers here, because that is one of the through lines for just about everything that President Trump and the people around him have done since noon on January 20th, and that is to expand the power of the executive branch. We've seen them run roughshod over Congress already, Republicans there not putting up much of a resistance, and now turning their attention to the judicial branch.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. Look, the president and his allies had really 4 years in exile in West Palm and some of these right-leaning or very right-leaning think tanks here in D.C. to figure out what they wanted to focus on in the first 100 days of President Trump's presidency, should he return. I'm talking about heritage. I'm talking about American first policies. I'm talking about all these aligned parties that are now having a large footprint in the White House. And so these are things that they planned. Now, maybe not everything that they thought that they would be able to do. They didn't know that those would all kind of get caught up in courts, as we're seeing these kind of cascading injunctions coming from the judicial branch. But surely they believe that some of them would. And so this is really an effort on their part to kind of test the bounds of what is possible. And like you said, expand executive power. Now, just in my conversations with White House officials over the last few days, I think that something is very clear, is that they are very upset at Judge Boasberg for his injunction on that Deportation Act. They believe that it's not within his jurisdiction, and that he is overplaying the power that he holds as a federal judge. And I think you're only going to see that real frustration escalate over the coming days unless the judge changes his ruling, which, obviously they're going to have proceedings over the next few days, but it's unclear whether or when or if that happens.
Well, and as we've been saying here over the last week, these same people weren't upset when a series of district court judges in the state of Texas, and they usually seem to be from the state of Texas, stopped dead in its tracks policies of the Biden administration and policies of the Obama administration. And this just happens. And that's why we have appeals courts. Jonathan Martin, let me ask you, though, with all that's going on right now, it depends on what poll you're looking at. But some polls show the president's approval ratings dipping, going up, et cetera, et cetera. It's too early. We're like barely in the bottom of the first inning here in this presidency. Right. I am curious, though, what are you hearing from inside the White House? What are you hearing on the Hill regarding just the chaos, the flooding of the zone, and whether it's having a negative impact on either the president's standings or the Republican standings?
Yeah, I think the Republicans who are candid about their political predicament recognize that they got to shoulder the burden of both Elon and Donald Trump, which is going to be a challenge. In 2017, 2018, Joe, we saw the movie before. There was a backlash. That was only Donald Trump. Now you have the added burden of Elon Musk. So what I hear, the most grumbling you get from folks around Trump, and it sounds like you got it recently too, Joe, is they point a finger at Elon, because it's a hell of a lot easier to blame Elon for their numbers or for some of the chaos than it is Trump himself. Nobody wants to blame Trump, right? That creates huge headaches for you politically if you do that, for obvious reasons. It's a lot easier to grumble about Elon, and I think that's why he probably is gonna, at some point gonna fade away, because whether it's the Trump allies on the staff, governors, GOP members of Congress, they got to have somebody to blame. They got to have a fall guy, and it's certainly going to be Elon before it's going to be Trump.